Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new and you like to hear about opinions, reviews, analyses, and ramblings on films, books, and TV shows, be sure to click that subscribe button for more content from me. Today we're doing my book rankings of 2023. So these are not necessarily books that were published in 2023, but the ones that I've read for the first time this year. And normally this would be like a top 10 situation, but I severely overestimated how many books I can read since it now takes me like about 20 business days to read a single book. So yeah, I used to be able to read like one book a day when I was like in elementary school, and I don't know what happened. So anyway, yeah, it's gonna be like a top 5 situation instead of a top 10. And okay, to be fair, in my defense too, there were like a few of the books that were on my TBR, but I just couldn't finish reading them because they were not it. Anyway, let's get into my rankings. So coming in hot, literally at number 5, we have Heated Rivalry by Rachel Reed. So this is a spicy sports romance, specifically hockey, rivals to lovers. Also, it's MLM, which is like a gay romance. So I've recently gotten into hockey like this past year, and I was so obsessed with a slow burn between Ilya Romanov and Shane Hollander, like in this book. Like, oh, it was insane. So when I say slow burn, like guys, this is a genuine slow burn. Like it is full on years in the making slow burn. 10 years in the making. So if slow burn is your thing, this is it. This is slow burn. Like in terms of feelings, it's slow burn, okay? And the romance between the two rival players, so they're both in like different teams, and those teams have a great rivalry between them. So it is so spicy and so good. And I really loved how their relationship was developed, and I swear these two owned me for a solid 2 months after I finished reading their story. So, an honorary mention regarding this book is that the sequel, it has a direct sequel called The Long Game, and they're basically part of this series called Game Changer, and they're all great reads, but you don't necessarily have to read every single book in order to understand the events of the other books. So, yeah, Heated Rivalry at number 5, definitely recommend it. So, let's move on now to number 4, and that's going to be the Folk of the Air trilogy by Holly Black. It's all 3 of these. This is a fantasy enemies to lovers slow burn. So I'm kind of cheating, okay? I'm not gonna lie. This is definitely a little bit cheating because it's a trilogy and not just a single book. But I want to say it's because like I chose to do the entire trilogy instead of just picking one specific book, because it is an overarching story. Like you gotta read every single book in the trilogy to understand the events. Like they're all connected. So I already made a video on the Folk of the Air trilogy, so I'll keep this short. But obviously it's a wreck, and I loved this. I love this trilogy, and so normally I'm not usually a fan of like political fantasy. Like I like fantasy, but political fantasy not as much. But this was very fascinating like to read, and I was absolutely hooked. Also like the the knife to throat scene between Jude and Cardan. Need I say more? Is that not enough to like get you to want to read this? Anyway, June Duarte was a badass, and Cardan Greenbrier was a simp, like as he should be. I too would for a knife wife like Jude. And so like the enemies to lovers, again, I already talked about this in like my previous video, but it's very literal. They try to kill each other as they should. Is it toxic? A little, but enemies to lovers is kind of meant to be toxic. I'm not gonna lie to you. Alright, so let's move on to my number 3, and my number 3 book of 2023 is Brothers Hawthorne by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. So this is a YA mystery. So I love the original trilogy, which is the Inheritance Games trilogy. So obviously I love the spin-off because as much as I love the Inheritance Games, I love reading, you know, Avery's point of view. It's one of the rare trilogies where I'm like, okay, I vibe with the first person. Usually I don't. But I have been dying for a Grayson point of view since like he was introduced in the Inheritance games, and so like I was just so thrilled with this. So it's both in Grayston and Jameson's point of view, but it's like a third person limited. And so there's just a lot of development going on for both Jameson and Grayston, and like I said, I loved reading their points of view, and I fell in love with these brothers all over again. That being said, because this is a spin-off to the original trilogy, I do strongly believe that you have to actually read the Inheritance Games trilogy in order to understand the events of this one, and this is definitely a major rec if you loved the original trilogy like I did. Alright, now let's move on to number 2. Okay, so my number 2 is Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. So this is a spicy STEM romance. And I've read only one other Ali Hazelwood book before, which is Love Hypothesis. And I already made a video on that like 2 years ago. I liked Love Hypothesis. It was great, but I loved Love Theoretically. Like, I am obsessed. So Elsie and Jack's relationship, in my opinion, was just so well written, and Jonathan Jack Smith Turner is an amazing book boyfriend. And I do love what Ali Hazelwood did with this, because there's this twist of the fake dating trope with Elsie fake dating Greg, who is Jack's half brother. Because like obviously if you've read a lot of fake dating like I have, it usually leads to the fake daters to fall in love with each other. But that's not the case with this one. You know, there's just lots of pining on Jack's end, which I love. I am a sucker for the pining trope. Like, if it has pining, it has me by a chokehold. So, here's the thing about this book. I never usually do this. But, as soon as I finished reading this book, Love Theoretically, I immediately went back, reopened the book, like, flipped it back to the beginning, and I reread it again. Like, even after the second read, like, it still hits. It is so rereadable. It is just so cute, so amazing, and just Jack and Elsie, man, like, oof. So actually, fun story about this book is that this would have actually been my number 1 book of the year. Like, no lie, this was gonna be my number 1. But then I managed to read this other book, which ended up becoming my number 1. So what is it? What is my number 1 read of 2023? The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. So this is a YA dystopian novel. It is the prequel to the Hunger Games trilogy. So, I was a huge Hunger Games girly as a kid. Like, I remember very clearly, for my 6th grade English class, we had to do a speech. And I did my speech on the Hunger Games trilogy. Like I said, guys, I was obsessed. I could recite so many paragraphs from the books, like, when I was 12 years old, and as soon as the movies came out, I would beg my parents, I'm like, please, we have to watch it, and I was just, like, glued to the screen, okay? So, with the film adaptation for The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes that released this year, I knew, like, I had to read the book before watching the film. And by the time that this video is being posted, I still haven't watched the film. But, you know, like, it was very big. Everyone keeps talking about it. So I'm like, okay, I want to read the books first just to, like, you know, prepare myself for the adaptation. Because, you know, as someone who also watches films, I do know that adaptations are not always, you know, beat by beat for, like, you know, from the book. So I want to read the book first before watching the film. Like, that's just my personal preference. So anyway, back to the actual book. This book reminded me of why I love Suzanne Collins. First of all, the literary references always own me. Like, it's the English major in me. Like, I see a literary reference from English lit, and I'm like, yeah, I love that. I vibe with that. And so, like, she also uses, like, she chooses names on purpose. And she does a lot of really great, like, foreshadowing and, like, connections and parallels. Like, she's just so great, okay? So, the way she wrote Coriolanus Snow as a teenager, I really liked it. It was a mind-blowing, like, characterization, because you could see, like, reading the book that he's cunning, and he's ambitious, and he's resourceful, but he's also proud and arrogant. and his monologue in the book definitely showed like how entitled and snobby he was. But for me personally, I'm intrigued by him as a character because of how cunning he is. Like, he is definitely one of the smartest, one of the most cunning characters I've ever read about. And again, while I was reading this novel, I'm keeping in mind that he turns into a tyrannical president in the trilogy. Like, he's been ruling Panem for goodness knows how long. But it is just so fascinating to read like how he becomes ruthless and how this ruthlessness has always kind of been in him. That way that, you like, the development just makes sense, in my opinion. And again, like, it's kind of mind-blowing because he's like barely 20 years old by the time the novel ends. And you're like, damn, dude, like, makes me feel a little underaccomplished because I'm 23 and what am I doing? Well, I've done a lot, but like clearly not as much as he had in the books. And the choices he makes, like in The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, definitely shapes the person he becomes, and choosing differently at any point, like the choices he makes, if he made a different choice at any point throughout the novel, this would have drastically changed like the trajectory of his life. But because he makes these decisions, he becomes that president in the original trilogy. And obviously I'm on TikTok, so I have seen TikToks, reels on Instagram of the girlies who are convinced that they can change him, Rip to Lucy Gray, but I could change presidents. You could not change that man, guys. His thoughts alone like show that he's a walking red flag. Like, I kid you not, there are times when I'm reading this book and then he thinks something about Lucy Gray, like mostly like how possessive he is of her, how he sees her as an object to possess, and I'm just like, yeah, no, this is not it. Like, it's sometimes the possessiveness trait in a man in like in books, it can work sometimes, but because of like the power imbalance, I say power imbalance because he is like this seemingly rich, entitled boy from the capital. He's her mentor, like, yeah. I mean, yeah, no, I was reading and I'm just like, I'm like, red flag. If I could, like, I will go back, reread it, and highlight every single time that he was like a walking red flag, okay? And also, he's so like insecure and easily jealous. Like, when I was reading near the end, like when he was in District 12, I'm just like, boy, calm down. It is not that serious. Like, yeesh. Whew. Anyway, she was also, by the way, speaking of Lucy Gray, she was right to dip when she did. Like, I'm pretty sure everyone's already seen, like, the TikToks, the reels, but she asked him who's the third person he killed. And she's just like, and he goes, my old self. And I'm like, congratulations, edgelord, congratulations. Anyway, another thing I really liked too, actually, was that they straight up mention in the book that Lucy Gray is named after a ballad by Wordsworth. And, when Snow first hears about, like, he hears, I think, the ballad as a song, and he's just like, he's confused, like, what's going on? Like, what is the, how did she just disappear into thin air? And then Lucy Gray's fate, like Lucy Gray in the novel, Suzanne Collins left it very ambiguous, same way as she did in the poem, and I just love that parallel. Like, I was like, oh, this hits so well. Of course I want to know, and like, everyone has their own theories, but I also like the not knowing, because then, like, the not knowing is what haunts us. So yeah, and in the novel too, like, you learn how instrumental Snow was in continuing the games, and the revelation that his dad also kind of had a hand in contributing to the game's creation with Casca Highbottom. It was absolutely like mind-blowing. I was reading it, I'm like, oh damn. I was like, damn. I was like, damn. But then again, you also, like, with how it ends, you understand how he became president. And it really is just such a fascinating read to see him become, like, a villain. Like, I don't want to say it's his villain origin story, because there's not one point that made him go, I'm gonna be a bad guy. It's like he chooses to actively be a bad guy because he wants to protect, like, his image. He wants to, like, he has this superiority complex, and that's what makes him like such a good villain too, was that, yeah, the superiority complex, but also like he does have his moments of kindness, but that kindness is like his way of manipulating like Lucy Gray or other people, because it's like he never does something nice just for the sake of being nice. Like there's an exchange that he's expecting, you know? So I just finished reading The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes like last week, and my mind is still blown. And this is why this book is number one for me this year, because it had me hooked, it had me wanting to read more, and Suzanne Collins writes his rise to power like really, really well. And again, this is not quite how he became president, but you can see how he would get there with how she ends like the novel, which is again insane to me. And again, so this is definitely a huge wreck, and this should definitely, like, the Hunger Games trilogy and this, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, should be a classic in English classes, in my opinion, because there's a lot of foreshadowing, the literary references, the parallels too between this prequel and the original trilogy is just, it's insane. So, just to sum up, so those are my top 5 books of 2023. We've got Heated Rivalry at number 5, The Folk of the Air trilogy at number 4, The Brothers Hawthorne at number 3, Love Theoretically at number 2, and finally The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes at number 1. And that's a wrap on my book rankings of 2023. My next video, which will be my film rankings of 2023, will be up tomorrow. So thank you so much for watching, have an awesome day, and please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you guys next time. Bye.